Do you think collective responsibility overrides individual responsibility in a huge issue like that?
No.
Everyone talks about how individual action is necessary when we're tackling climate change and environmental degradation. But it's very easy to feel helpless when you read newspaper reports of corporations polluting rivers and governments giving approvals to cut down large areas of forest land. When I see these reports, I begin to wonder how my decision to take public transport or buy eco-labeled sustainable products is going to make any difference in the big picture. Does my individual action, small and limited as it is, matter in a problem as large and complex as climate change and environmental degradation? Isn't this something that only governments and corporations with truckloads of money can fix? A YouTube video of Jordan Peterson answering this question on an Australian TV show called Q&A is quite popular, and I'm going to use that video as a reference point.
So what is your advice to young people when you talk about you need to be individually responsible, but when there are things that are so far out of our control, like climate catastrophe, like the precarious job economy, like the economic crisis, what is your answer to
Do you think
people
that
who
you're
are
worse
facing
off
these
than
questions?
you think?
The moderator simplifies this question and poses it to Jordan Peterson again.
Try answering the question about collective responsibility on climate change, for example. Pick one part of that, because the argument, I think, is that individual responsibility does not change the climate, does not fix the problem that needs global collective responsibility. So
Jordan Peterson's stance on this topic was very firm. He says that if people take individual responsibility, fix their own lives, and move forward in their careers, they can steer the community in a better direction. A well-informed individual can guide the community towards better climate action. When pressed by the moderator to give a yes or no answer to the question,
do you think collective responsibility overrides individual responsibility in a huge issue like that?
No.
This is one of those rare instances where Jordan gives a straight answer. I'll share my thoughts on this answer in a moment, but before I do that, I want to highlight a problem with this question. Unconsciously, we frame this question as a battle. Individual response versus collective response. Which is more important? It creates fertile ground for blame games. The government can look at the individuals and say, oh look, the citizens aren't demanding change, why should we change? And the citizens, the individuals, can look at the government and say, how can we do anything if the government doesn't do anything? So that's a stalemate that we don't want. Let's not do that. Individual action and collective response are related. They feed into each other. This is because individual action never manifests itself only at the individual level. Ripples of it are felt in the people around you, either immediately or eventually. This is what Jordan doesn't illustrate in that clip, but let me do so. Let's take Jordan's advice to clean your room literally here. Growing up, if I ever cleaned my room, the end result was never that Saurabh has a clean room. If I cleaned my room, I wanted my mom to notice that I cleaned my room. So I would go into the kitchen or the bedroom and I would drag her from whatever she was doing into my room, and I would proudly show her my beautifully organized, clean room. And she would beam at me and say, well done. And then she would go into the living room, drag my brother from in front of the TV, bring him into my room and say, look at your brother. Why can't you clean your room also? My brother would look at the both of us in absolute disgust and then walk back. But by the end of the day, he would clean his room. Or if he was feeling particularly rebellious, he would clean it the next day. Or at the very least, he would organize his table. My action influenced something else in the house, however small the influence was. You see this acting out everywhere in your life. For example, if you carried a cloth bag every time you went to the supermarket, then people are going to notice. The cashiers are definitely going to notice. they ask you if you want a carry bag every time you're at the billing counter, and if you refuse every time and say you have your own cloth bag, then they're going to realize that you carry your own bag. And if you start building a rapport with them and they start liking you, then they're going to start recommending what you do to their other customers. I've seen this happening. This happened when one of the billing counter guys told me that there's this woman who always brings her own cloth bag, and that was one of the reasons why I started carrying a cloth bag of my own every time I went to that supermarket. There are other ways to engage and influence people around you at an individual level. For example, if you feel like there is some kind of a sustainable measure that your apartment complex or your residential complex can take up, why don't you go and speak with the Resident Welfare Association? Back in college, my friends and I interned with an NGO called Force, and as part of our work, we went to different residential complexes and helped them design rainwater harvesting systems. The resident welfare associations probably wouldn't have thought of this off the top of their heads. Some resident would have initiated this discussion with them, and they would have convinced the association to take up rainwater harvesting measures in the entire complex. That one person managed to influence positive action in that entire community. Now, I'm not suggesting that government response or corporate responsibility is not needed. And to his credit, neither is Jordan.
I'm not suggesting in the least, and have never suggested, that there's no domain for social action.
But government processes are notoriously slow, and corporations hate change. In a situation where we need to act fast, we can't stand idly by and wait for these big bodies to make a decision before we do something. We need to actively engage, and I think that the ripple effects of our individual action can be the catalyst for these large bodies to eventually change. We happen to live in a world where not every decision of society rests with our rulers. One of the benefits of this capitalist and democratic society is that individual action can influence many things. So if you want to see more renewable energy generation, but you don't have the knowledge to set up your own company or the finances to set up a rooftop solar panel, then invest in a renewable energy startup. If you want the government to be more mindful of environmental issues, then support environmental journals that ask the government tough questions, or donate to charities or support environmental activists who point out poor practices. These are all individual actions, and they have a very clear, tangible effect on collective response. So on the whole, I agree with what Jordan Peterson says. Individual action does and can have a huge role to play in climate action and preventing environmental degradation. That's my take on this question, and I'm curious to know what you think. Does individual responsibility have a role to play in climate action? Please comment your answers down below. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, then please like it, please share it, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed. Keep supporting us as we try to make the world ecologically intelligent.